justice and environmental protection within the nonprofit and philanthropic fields aims to directly benefit communities of color and low-income communities disproportionately impacted by climate change, who are also historically underrepresented in policy development and implementation. A few other things to know about Shamar. Her favorite quote is, "Hold the vision and trust the process," from Esther Hicks. A simple reminder to stay focused on the bigger picture, even when the path feels uncertain. Seeing people marching in the streets for justice and fairness is giving Shamar hope in these times, as she has a deep belief in people and the power of collective action to drive change. Her shero is Jacqueline Patterson. Jackie is the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project, a close ally and friend who has a fierce commitment to Black frontline leadership, who often works quietly and in not so quiet ways to ensure that the women holding and leading the work are safe, cared for, seen, and protected. Early in her career, Shamar took a detour from environmental work and spent several years in Los Angeles as a working actress. Years later, after returning to the environmental field, she became a philanthropic trustee of the Solutions Project, a nonprofit that leverages culture and creativity to build power in frontline communities. A full circle and serendipitous moment, since the organization's co-founder and board chair is actor Mark Ruffalo, and actor Dawn Cheadle also serves on the board. She's got friends. When she's not working, you can find Shamar enjoying the outdoors, preferably near water. She's also a foodie at heart. How was dinner? She's also a foodie at heart and loves a good meal, ocean views, and music. And to close, the accomplishment Shamar is most proud of is co-creating and supporting the launch of the Fellowship for Liberated Futures, a program dedicated to the well-being and respite of Black women working at the intersection of climate justice and racial justice. She's going to share more about that work tonight. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Shamar Bibbins.
Kind and generous introduction. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey. So I am the granddaughter of Leela Pearl and Ruby Elaine, two fierce women who lived extraordinary lives, who poured love, wisdom, and expectation into me. I learned the power of a woman by watching them. Organizing neighbors who didn't know they were being organized. Leading endless church activities. Preparing holiday meals for more people than the house could hold. Which in hindsight, I'm sure probably was like a fire hazard on occasion. They held down their husbands and children. They spoke up when necessary. And just as often, it was what they didn't say. A look, a gesture, as my grandma Ruby would often say, that spoke volumes. It was through them and through my mother, aunts, and other women in my family that I learned something early and deeply. It is women who make things happen. So for me, there truly is nothing more meaningful than being here with you tonight to support, to elevate, to celebrate women's leadership. Thank you, Fran, Jamie, and the entire leadership and staff and the entire membership of Rachel's Network for inviting me to share space with you tonight and offer a few reflections as you close your spring meeting. I truly am humble and deeply grateful for all the women who stood before me, who came before me, so I can stand here tonight and do the work that I get to do. Our indigenous women who were knowledge keepers, stewards and defenders of our land, water, and life systems. My ancestors whose labor cultivated land and ecosystems across Africa and the Caribbean and here in the US. for the leaders of the modern environmental movement and those who pioneered environmental justice, and for each of you who every single day are fighting for the people and planting and centering women of color who in this movement, for a movement who too often overlooks them. So thank you. So before I say anything about funding or strategy, I also want to say how excited I am that y'all are here in Detroit. As Kimberly said, I am truly a proud Detroiter. There is nothing more that I enjoy than showing off our city, especially to those friends and colleagues who are here for the first time. Who come here and often leave very surprised. I've had conversations tonight about people who are surprised about how different the experience is from what the narrative they've heard. I truly, truly hope you've enjoyed your time here. And my only ask is that you come back because there's so much more to see, which you already, I think, have understood from your time here. So I'm a fourth generation Detroiter. This is the place that shaped me. This is the place that I ultimately returned home to after living in cities across the country and abroad. And I can say without hesitation, there is no place like Detroit. Some of my fondest memories, childhood memories, they're simple ones. Packing into my grandparents' car after Sunday dinner, spending long afternoons at Bilal, which many of you saw today. We would ride the famous giant slide till like literally our bodies hurt. Or later in life, walking the wooded trails of Palmer Park with my parents, which is a city park on the northwest side of Detroit. It was in those spaces that I felt alive. I felt joyful, I felt free. But at the same time, I also grew up walking past vacant homes, overgrown lots, and neglected playgrounds on my daily commute to school. For 8 years, there was a crumbling, vacant house on the corner of our block. And I often remember just wondering, when is help gonna come? By the time I left for college, that house was still standing, still an eyesore, still a hazard. Growing up in Detroit, I saw firsthand how disinvestment harms community health and well-being. It decays the built environment, yes, but it also dims the brilliance of the people who live there. These experiences shaped my life's work. They are why I focused my career on investing in people and places that have been marginalized, left behind, and simply forgotten. Detroit taught me what community really is, what it takes to care for one another, what you gain by loving community, and what's lost when community is fractured. These foundations deeply inform how I approach my role as a funding partner. Tonight, I want to connect what you've seen and felt here in Detroit with what I've learned funding climate work nationally, and leave you with a few practical ways funders can help accelerate a just, green future without leaving communities behind. My 12 years in philanthropy have taught me more than I could possibly share. It's taught me what equitable solutions look like. From Detroit's first Resilience Hub network, to Portland's groundbreaking Clean Energy Fund, to Newark's and the country's first environmental justice and cumulative impacts order, and so much more. But equally important as solutions we've invested in, my time in philanthropy has taught me lessons about how we invest. And one truth has become clear to me. A just green future is built through place, power, and care. And all three of those things must work together. So tonight, I'd like to offer just a few reflections on those three things. The first, the power of place. So if there's one lesson that Detroit has taught us, is that place is not a backdrop, it's a protagonist. Climate change may be global, but the impacts, its solutions, and its leadership are profoundly local. Place determines the risk communities face, the tools they have, and the histories they carry. Your time in Detroit these past 2 days visiting neighborhoods and meeting with organizers, hearing from the local leaders, It's not just a field trip, it's a reminder that you cannot effectively fund what you do not understand. And you cannot understand the place without listening to the people who live there. At Kresge, working nationally while staying rooted in local realities has been one of our greatest strengths. As a national funder, it's essential to forge trusted partnership with local philanthropy, local government, and community and civic leadership. But equally important is investing in networks across those sectors to amplify learning, leadership, and build connective tissue in and across places. Through our initiatives like our Climate Change, Health, and Equity Initiative and our Climate Resilience and Equitable Water Systems cohorts, we bring together community-based organizations and national partners to learn from one another, to share strategies, to amplify collective action, and to create blueprints that other cities can adapt. This allows local organizations to deepen their relationships across geographies while understanding, informing, and learning from national efforts. At the same time, it enables national organizations to expand their understanding of how change takes place on the ground. We've seen relationships grow organically and authentically, and in many cases, broaden collaboration and work together. Because the truth of the matter is, when you're head down in Detroit doing the work, you don't have the luxury often, even with best intentions, to pick your head up and figure out what's happening in Pittsburgh or in Buffalo, but networks can help lift the gaze. When we launched the second phase of our Climate Change, Health, and Equity Initiative last year in October, we nearly doubled the community-based grant making from 14 organizations to 25. This allowed us to land a cluster of investments in each of Kresge's four focus cities, which are here in Detroit, New Orleans, Memphis, and Fresno, California. We partnered, the environment team, we partnered closely with the Detroit team and with our American Cities practice to listen and understand what their existing grantees in those cities working on environment and climate resilience and health equity had to say about what it would take for them to deepen their work at those intersections. Through this deep listening, we broadened the type of community-based partners who we funded through the initiative. So for example, in New Orleans, it was organizations leading with a community development frame. In Memphis, those with a food sovereignty lens. Organizations that honestly we might have otherwise missed had we not taken the time to understand the local context for their work. Place gives us context, but understanding context alone doesn't guarantee change. To move from understanding to action, communities need power, which brings me to my second point. Building community capacity and power. So if place tells us what we need, a community's capacity and power determines who gets to decide. Too often, philanthropy funds climate work only through organizations with environment or climate in the title. But as we know, climate impacts don't stay in their lane. They show up in housing and health and transportation and economic opportunities, so the people closest to those issues should be a part of the solution. When we launched the Climate Resilience and Urban Opportunity Initiative in 2014, we intentionally shifted resources directly to community-based organizations, community-based equity-focused organizations, many of whom had not been considered climate grantees. The intention was to build the capacity of community-based organizations who sought to deepen their experience on climate change. Catalyst Miami is a perfect example, one of our partners. In 2014, Catalyst Miami was a prominent human services organization in Miami-Dade County. They provided services for health, education, and financial coaching. They began addressing climate change because residents were coming to them for help with flooding, hurricane impacts, and financial instability. So their climate work emerged from the lived experience of the people they serve, not from a strategic plan. By investing in their capacity, organizing, policy development, civic engagement, Catalyst Miami grew into one of the region's anchor climate justice organizations. Early on, they helped shape the Miami-Dade County's, their first resilience budget, and they co-founded the Miami Climate Alliance. The organization today now integrates climate resilience into nearly every aspect of their mission, working alongside civic, philanthropic, and frontline communities to build power at the local and state level to ensure that Miami has a climate future where everyone can thrive. When we expand our understanding of what counts as climate work and move beyond the idea that environmental solutions must look one particular way or the other, we open the door for communities to self-determine what they need and who needs to be at the table with them. Sometimes that looks like community health partnerships. Other times it looks like community organizations working with water or energy utilities, or residents in local government or local businesses, and oftentimes it's all of the above. Throughout our portfolio at Kresge, we invest in community capacity to build different and better models of leadership. Models where community members and stakeholders don't just participate, but shape co-governance itself. Because what's the value of elevating community voice when no one's listening, or if no one's listening, and if there are no structures for accountability? Our work is to ensure that accountability exists, because community power is not just access, it's accountability, shared decision-making, distributed leadership, and solutions shaped by those most affected. But the truth of the matter is, the work of power building and transformation is exhausting. And the people doing the work too often are sacrificing their health and wellness to do the work, as we all know. Which brings me to my third point, fostering a community of care. Now, this is the part that philanthropy rarely talks about. Not philanthropy in this room, but philanthropy in general. But it is the part that has changed me the most as a funder. Organizations, as we know, are made of people. And in the environment and the climate justice work, in the environmental space, we know that those people are overwhelmingly women and women of color. So well before 2020, before the onset of COVID-19, before the murder of George Floyd, before the country's racial reckoning, these women were already carrying the weight of multiple crises at once. A hurricane one month, the ice wave the next month, inadequate health care, on top of chronic underinvestment in their organizations. We in philanthropy are empathetic, and at best, philanthropy moves resources to respond to a moment. But we still expect our nonprofit leaders to show up with the same energy, the same creativity, the same resilience, often without additional support. I've sat in rooms where trauma surfaced in real ways. I've watched brilliant leaders burn out because they were holding their communities with no safety net of their own. And I've grappled with my own proximity to burnout. Today, the landscape is even more challenging, as we know, than just 5 years ago. The current administration's attacks on climate action and the demonization of many of our environmental and climate leaders have deepened an already bleak funding environment and significantly threatened the safety, security, well-being of our leaders and organizations. The federal government has left the building. We continue to see shifting priorities among philanthropy, and the material conditions of the communities we seek to serve have not changed. In fact, in many ways, with rising energy prices, weakened environmental protections, and escalating climate impacts, the communities are worse off. I'm really sorry to state the obvious because we know this and the bleak, but if we say we care about the condition of people and planet, we must care about the resilience of the people doing the work to protect them. And so that means funding wellness and rest. It means reducing reporting burdens. It means having an adaptive approach when our neatly crafted grant-making strategies fail or fall short in the face of yet another crisis. It means asking, what can we take off your plate instead of what else can you deliver? And asking, how can we help? In 2023, we launched the Fellowship for Liberated Futures with Kimberly mentioned in partnership with Pro-Inspire, the Chisholm Legacy Project, and Dr. Shara Reed. It's an 18-month fellowship providing rest, respite, and well-being for Black women working at the intersection of climate change and racial justice. The second cohort is currently underway. It's one offering, one model, but it represents our deep belief that it is our responsibility to care for the whole person and invest in our leaders' well-being just as much as we invest in projects, places, and power building. When I get an unprompted text message from a leader saying, that coaching I received from the fellowship literally changed my life, it's the only metric and only measure of success that I need. When we launched the fellowship, it was about the offering, but not only just about the offering itself. It was an attempt to really try to strengthen the narrative within philanthropy about the need for this type of support, not as a response to a moment, but as a practice. And you all are already doing this. The Rachel's Network's Catalyst Award is tremendous, and I just thank you for your leadership in the space and applaud you for what you're doing. And many other funders who are really funding wellness and well-being of our environmental defenders. But the field needs so much more, and we have a responsibility to support the mental, physical, and spiritual well-being of the people we fund just as much as we support the fiscal health of the organizations. Otherwise, I call it malpractice. It is what the times require. It's not a nice to do, but it is a way of being as our practice. Because place gives us context, power gives community agency, but care, it is the care, is what makes the work and the people sustainable. And without sustainability, there is no justice. So tonight, I want to leave you with this. We are living in a moment that demands courage from us all, especially from funders. Not performative courage, not theoretical courage, but courage to fund differently. The courage to slow down and understand place. The courage to invest in community power, not just community participation. The courage to care for people doing the work, not as an add-on, but as a strategy. Because the truth is, climate justice is not a technical problem. It is a relational one. It's about who is seen, who is heard, and who gets to shape the future. And if we as funders can align our resources with the wisdom of place, the leadership of communities, the power of networks, and the humanity of people doing the work, we will not just fund projects, we will fund transformation. I challenge myself every day. Am I doing enough? And if I'm honest, it often feels daunting answering that question. But then I remember the women throughout history, including my ancestors and yours, have always known what to do. We have always known how to build, how to nurture, how to protect, and how to imagine beyond what exists. My hope is that when we lean into our imaginations, when we remind ourselves of the future we want to exist, the false choices that have long divided our field begin to fade. Urban versus rural, resilience versus adaptation, conservation versus community development, mitigation versus justice, you fill in the blank. Because the work has never been about either or, it's been about both and. And while we are not called to do everything, we are called to fiercely protect this one home we share, Mother Earth, and all the people and ecosystems within it. And when each of us steps into our unique role, collectively, we make it possible for every community. from the 8th Ward of Washington, D.C., to Southwest Detroit, to the lower 9th Ward of New Orleans, to America's Heartland, to the rolling hills in San Diego, every community, to have clean air, fresh water, healthy food, vibrant green space, and the ability to thrive in a changing climate. Our ancestors laid the path for us, and our future depends on us. So let us lead with that wisdom, let us fund with that wisdom, and let us build a just green future worthy of the communities we serve. Thank you so much.